annual Regional Housing Initiative report for 2022-2023. That's available on our website. MCRPC staff presented the research findings on best practices in residential zoning. Kudos to Tanya for all her hard work. And that was presented at the Regional Housing Initiative Housing Staff Committee meeting. MCRPC staff submitted the Town of Normal Q1 CDBG report for program year 23 to 24, and MCRPC staff reviewed responses to the RISE Housing Grant request for proposals, and we will conduct interviews with potential consultants over the next week. For our local updates, the Housing Navigator position was filled at Mid-Central Community Action. The position is now being duly funded through the City of Bloomington and the Town of Normal. MCRPC staff presented the preservation of LIHTC in McLean County white paper issue 2B at the Housing Assistance Coalition meeting, and discussed the newly released application forms for Affordable Rental Housing Tax Incentive Program authorized by Illinois House Bill 2621. I have a copy of that if anyone's interested, or feel free to ask me more if you'd like to know more. MCRPC staff is also participating on an ongoing housing work group meetings with the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council for implementation of the Mental Health Action Plan. And that is the BHCC.
Good. Thanks, Mark. Any questions for Mark? The next item is on Division 0, which Ray will comment on.
We kind of in the last month we've been preparing, and lots of staff with the coordination handled by Nancy to have to do some public engagement on transportation safety. So our staff were out at the county fair. It was last week, and so it's fine. There's some things I'm actually. So staff were out there to promote. We share a table with the Connect Transit folks, and so we, as you. We call it a big storm that came through, part of it in early Saturday morning, and so the tent crumbled, but then everybody was safe, so that's a good. And although nobody was there, but staff, we had a lot of different kind of interesting things. We gave a lot of giveaways, swags, including for pledge cards for folks to pledge for like behavioral practices and change, how they to practice safe driving or walking, and different ways to practice safety, basically. And also we have like coloring books and some swags, basically promote traffic safety. And so that county fair was really our first kind of major endeavors in terms of public engagement and outreach. It's a result of the two IDOT grants that we were awarded, and thanks to IDOT, and also thank you to the county highway who provide some reflective vests for us to use out there. But the staff did most of the work, thanks to Nancy and the staff members who spend time over there during the week and also on the weekends. So from that event, we also asked folks who stop by our booth or table to couple about where they're coming from. So we on a map, and so we find out that while most of them are from the urban area, there are a lot of folks also from the rural area, and some even from other adjoining counties. And also, so it's good. All those swags we gave away, like really over 1,000 different kinds of swags. So that's a good start. The next event we are hitting will be the Sweet Corn Circus. That thanks to the Town Normal, that will be sharing a table with them at the event at the last weekend in August. It'll be a 2-day event, and we'll be doing similar thing just to promote traffic safety, transportation safety. So yeah, just to give up this it's the opportunity for staff to actually don't just see in the office, but to get out and reach out to the community. And we're doing more and more of those too. As part of the Go Safe plan, but and also the other grants that we have received as part of the outreach and public awareness. So working on the other grants, some are still kind of the agreement stage, we're getting close. So you'll see more activities. We'll report to you.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
Kathleen has joined us.
Hello.
Would you like to?
Didn't know where, I thought you were in a different room, so that's under construction where I thought you were.
Yeah, if I may, Kathleen Lawrence, who is the co-chair, she's here today as the co-chair of the Housing Assistance Coalition, and she'll give you really a really good presentation, I'm sure, shortly. But as you may or may not know, she wears different hats in the committee, into our community services. One hat she wears as a council member for the town normal on the town council. And so she, for day job, she works for United Way as the committee investment director.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I'll let you to share what other hats you wear, because it just seems
I
like
think those are, well, mom and wife.
that's important.
Those go without saying. But yeah, I lived in this community for 30 years and had the good fortune of all the amenities that this community has to raise my family. And so it was kind of a natural fit for me when someone put the bug in my ear back in 2015 to try to run for Normal Town Council. And so I've been on 2 full terms and just was reelected to a 3rd term. And along the way, I've been, for the last 4 or 5 years, I guess now, affiliated with United Way and now working as the community investment director. So it's really a nice meshing of my community service with my day job as well. So the topic that I'll be talking about will be the housing situation.
Yeah, and as the commission members recall, for months, actually years, we started collaborating and partnering with the Housing Assistance Coalition, when the pandemic started. And so you've been hearing our updates that make references to the Housing Assistance Coalition. And because of the fading of the pandemic, I think the growth in Kathy will talk more, maybe seeing what direction to go next. Yeah. But it all was created because of the pandemic to assist people in need, especially in housing. But that's the reason why we have invited representatives from different groups. Last time we had someone from MCCA, Miami County Community Action. And then today, we are so glad that Kathleen is willing to give us a presentation again on this really major activity initiative as part of our regional housing initiative. So take it away.
Okay. Do you have it queued up for me? Or
yeah, I'll just share the screen.
Okay, wonderful. Well, if it's all right, I'll kind of stand over here. That way I think I can.
Yeah, just so you know, the camera is up above the screen.
Okay, so hello. You'll just be seeing the screen, hopefully, for those of you who are not here live. And I've got a slide deck to work through, and I'm going to try to move through the first couple pretty quickly, and I'll just kind of give you a nod.
That sounds good. Can you guys see the presentation online?
Should be.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yes. Okay. So this is almost kind of 2 presentations in one, because in order for me to talk about the Housing Coalition and the work that United Way is doing, I think it's important, and I take the opportunity in community groups like this to give an update on what is going on at United Way. There's somebody that's interested. Thank you. So let's just kind of go through these quickly, and you can move to the next one. The crisis. We're going to stay here for just a minute. And I kind of start on a down note. We had our own crisis, United Way did, in about 2016. Not alone. And when you think about United Ways across the country even, we've begun to experience more and more larger corporations not wanting to do the traditional 3-part form, fill out, give at the office to United Way. How many of you have remembered doing that? Yeah, lots of nods. So in many ways, because of this fairly radical change, United Ways all across the country are having to kind of reinvent how they go about doing what they do. For us, it was almost an existential crisis because we have in this community, and still to this day, although I think we're a little more diversified, all of our eggs in one basket, one employer basket, was predominantly for decades State Farm. And so when State Farm made the decision, like a lot of corporations do, to not do those sorts of employee giving, but they replaced it with options, what was called employee choice. So it wasn't like they were not giving, but they went a different direction. Thanks in part largely to phones, smartphones like this, where you can just scan a QR code and get to whatever you'd like. So for us, that meant a drop of about 45% of what normally came in. About $3.5 million used to come in annually for United Way community fall campaigns, and 45% gone in one decision. 9,000 donors we didn't have information on. Do not run your 401k this way. Be more diversified. Know what you're investing in, okay? So lesson learned the hard way. Country followed suit, as is kind of typical. So we've had to reinvent ourselves. And one thought was, do we just go away? But the problem with that idea was there's also a crisis going on in this community. And so we didn't walk away. But we have had to reinvent how we do things. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, one of which is helping with Housing Coalition. So let's go to the next slide. Here's the crisis going on in this community. I call it the thin veneer of affluence that we enjoy in this community. And a lot of it is, to universities, finance and insurance industry, robust healthcare industry, great places to work. But it doesn't take much to get below that affluence, and a great place to raise a family, everything that I experienced, right? Before we find some pretty startling statistics on poverty. So about the same time that some of these other changes were happening, we invested in a database, as United Ways all across the country did, called ALICE. ALICE for us stands for an acronym: Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. What that essentially might be short term or short jargon for working poor. So you've got the federal, designation of what poverty is, and then you've got a whole bunch of other people who have really begun to even struggle more so. Thank you, pandemic. Thank you, inflation. But these are actually pre-pandemic, pre-inflation numbers. I just haven't gotten the new ones into the slide deck yet. They're worse. Not by a lot, but they're not going in the right direction. 36% of McLean County residents are in or near poverty. That near poverty is the ALICE. That translates to 24,000 households. Increased since 2010 by 72%. So during those years, the real crying shame of all of this is during those years when we were pumping $3.5–4 million of United Way campaign money into this community, we weren't keeping up. Not for a lack of trying, not for a lack of some really, really, really good social service agencies, but lacking something. And that's why we didn't walk away from this community when we had every reason to fold up shop and close out the lights. Let's go ahead. We do believe our neighbors are falling through service gaps. So while we have a lot of great individual efforts, like a lot of organizations and a lot of communities, we tend to work very siloed. So let's go to the next slide. We commit ourselves, back up one, to this comprehensive and a coordinated approach. And so we are rebuilding ourselves through this approach. Let's go ahead to our approach and the next one, to 3 simple ideas. Back in the day, we might be able to cut checks for, 40 some programs, 30 some or more agencies, had an open grant cycle. Those were the glory days, except when instead of your pot being this big, it got this big, and suddenly those checks got a whole lot smaller. And so we really have just kind of focused our efforts on three main areas. Pathways to prosperity, really driven from the whole poverty set of statistics I'm talking about. And I'll talk briefly about that. I really want to spend some time on this community partnership because that's where the Housing Coalition effort lives. And then 180 United is just our story of what I just told you. We internally have adopted this as a kind of our own internal logo of 180 United. We had to make a 180-degree change. And we are still making that 180-degree change in how we can better serve this community. The days of walking up to whatever floor of State Farm are over, and that's okay. And I personally believe it's the best thing that's ever happened to us because we've had to look at this community differently. We've had to focus on problems and solutions as opposed to just spending our time, writing checks. Writing checks are good, but I think what we're doing now is more tangible and more direct. And that's the message we like to give our donors too, by the way. So 180 United, I think, is quite honestly one of the best things internally and perhaps externally too that's ever happened. Let me just briefly touch on a couple of the key areas of Pathways to Prosperity where we are directing most of our donor dollars. We can advance. Two areas, workforce development, that gets exactly at the ALICE data that I was talking about. So a lot of people in this community that are not going off to four-year universities like my kids did, okay? I would say that my kids maybe are more the anomaly. So a lot of folks in this community that feel like it is a dead end. And that's really, really sad. And we need to kind of pull back the curtains on that. So we've developed a community solution. It's not ours, but we've cobbled together people who can help us with this to create an end-to-end solution, not just a jobs program, not just a tuition or a scholarship, but truly an end-to-end solution for getting somebody from, I got nowhere to work and I'm on public aid for the rest of my life, to generationally changing their trajectory to, I am now a certified CNA and going on for my RN degree. And I'm the first person in my family to do this. Or before Workforce 180, I was couch surfing and had nowhere to call home and had basically emancipated myself from my family at 18. But now I'm a paramedic working up in El Paso and I bought a house. Those are the kind of 180 changes that we're making. We've got about 100 students involved with this effort. We work closely with the area high schools and of course Heartland Community College. Thrive Mind is the other. I think my next slide probably talks about, this is my example of the paramedic, AJ. So we've got 20 more people like her that we've got stories, turnaround stories, 80 more in the pipeline and another 20 that we're talking to right now. And this has been in existence since 2019. Let's go to Thrive Mind, the next slide. This is an initiative that just got started about a year ago where we saw a gap in the mental health services for youth, particularly for our students in schools out in the county. And because they not only have an access issue for availability, but also geographically, right? So Paul Dieters is quoted here, Lexington school superintendent, young people are under immense pressure. I love connecting them to professionals. Thrive Mind is providing access. We are funding and students to be able to go to available counseling services at Carl Broman. They've had some expansion in their services. So almost kind of like an EAP program where like there's slots of appointments that are held for these students to get in. And we get them started. Now, a lot of them are Medicare, Medicaid eligible. So they don't have to continue on. They don't have to continue to have the private donation of United Way. But for Thrive Mind, I would say that they would not have ever walked into a counselor's door. And so maybe we can help them for 3 months or 6 months until they graduate. But then the rest of their life, the stigma of going to a counselor is hopefully gone. And perhaps there's continuation. and their public aid services can continue from there. So, but for Thrive Mind, many of these students would not even think to go. They would be the ones, sadly, and maybe in a little bit of a snarky way, you know, if we don't intervene, where are they going to end up? They're going to end up, sadly, perhaps in the criminal justice system. There'll be a line item in the records management Aegis system. Is that where, I know we've got a new jail and we're buying a new Aegis system with our county dollars, but do we really want to invest our money only there? I think it's better that we're prompting some upstream. So that's the kind of work we're doing at United Way in our Pathways to Prosperity. Now let's go on to the next slide. Community partnership is really where the housing goes into. And this is where I think in the next slide, the meeting of the two presentations collide. There's a couple more things that we're doing. We still do write just some checks. We've helped with about $250,000, I believe, to help start up Bridge Academy. That also got some seed money from the shared sales tax. The Bloomington and Normal helped fund the county for some mental health efforts. We came in, private dollars, public dollars, nice little partnership there. Next one, we came together with about 4 or 5 other organizations, municipalities being 2 of them, the county, I think, being a third, us, the laborers, and a private family foundation have funded this Carl Mobile Health Clinic. It will be in and around McLean County. Up to this point, we were borrowing the one from Champaign County. It was only coming over once a month. Now we've got our own. It was about a $700,000. We put in about 150. The other entities all put in around 100 or so $1,000. So community came together, community partnerships. This is huge on access. This might be going out to serve our kids for Thrive Mind. Never know, right? Right now we're bringing them over to Bloomington. Okay, so now let's go into the Housing Coalition. This is another area, this has got some animation in it. If there's 3 things to take away from what our Housing Coalition is doing, it's gathering data, helping navigate, and looking for funding. Those are the 3 things that housing needs right now. Let's go to the next one. It did start, as Ray said, with the pandemic and our stakeholders. I mean, gosh, there's probably like 65 or 70 people that come together 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon every month via Zoom. And they represent roughly these categories: from public utilities, community service, social service, shelters, legal services, education system, government, even faith-based organizations. At times we've had some of the landlords, and I've even gotten, you know who's really interested in this? Rivian. Rivian is extremely interested in the housing issue. Why? What's causing it, basically. And so they really want to know. The other thing is they hire a lot of people that have some social service needs. And so they've been leaning on us quite a bit to find out, who do I send people to? So it's been an interesting conversation that and relationship that we're building with Rivian. All right, so stakeholders. So let's go on to the next slide and kind of show you how in the early part of this coalition that came together, we were largely doing interagency coordination because we had a lot of money falling from the sky for COVID relief. And so we came together, and I think in a almost like a case study sort of way, helped to work together and leverage over $5 million, or at least that's where we stopped counting, I think, of related financial assistance. And how we did that was that a really good spreadsheet from some folks that worked for this organization and tracking who's got what pot of money and what are the eligibility factors. And we would come together at these meetings and be like, well, okay, I've got a pot of money and it's good for this, this, and this. And oh, I've got some money over here and it's good for this, this, and this. And imagine that, we started talking and people really started being able to leverage, you know, utility assistance, mortgage assistance, rental assistance. And it was really a great example of working together. Now let's move forward. A lot of our coalitions that we put together around the pandemic, you know, ceased to exist except for this one because a new set of issues emerged. And I've listed the 5 of them there. Now, early on, I said data, navigation, and funding. If you kind of think about these being vertical, those other 3, data, navigation, and funding, almost kind of go across or layer over them. Because each one of these, I could probably talk a little bit about data navigation and funding. But let's talk about data. That one probably most, let's go to the next slide. The next one. Right now, we've identified that we do not have a good system for gathering data on the precariously housed. There is a definition of homeless, and then there's homeless. So the definition of homeless, according to HUD, is that you're out on the curb, you've got nowhere to go, or you're in a domestic violence situation. And we all know that there's a lot of people who are couch surfing, living hotel to hotel, you know, a couple of months here, a couple of months there. They're not getting captured. We can't get our arms around them. We don't know how many of them there really are. We do know when they show up on cold weather nights, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So a couple of things are happening here that the coalition is paying attention to. One is we did put in with the coordination with the environmental or the Ecology Action Center for ISU faculty to perhaps help us with a study on that. On a more practical level, there was a 100-day challenge that was sponsored by our Continuum of Care, and they've actually got some practical ideas underway right now with the use of some fancier Excel spreadsheets that we might be able to start getting our hands around the precariously housed. But this is the area that is most in kind of crisis right now because of the fact that we've got more people looking for housing, it's gotten more expensive, and it's the supply and demand is just not in their favor right now. And so these are the people that, you know, can least afford to spend a lot of money on, you know, application after application after application. The other really bizarre thing that happens, I've learned, is that each time they have to apply, a credit report gets run on them. And with every credit report, an unintended consequence is your credit score goes down. So a lot of these people are just trying to get, you know, their head above water, and yet the system is shoving down their credit score. So we've got to get a better handle on our data collection methods. Let's go to the next one. Temporary housing. This is the other thing we realized. You remember at Christmas time, kind of hard to think about it now, but we had that god awful, like really cold polar vortex 4 or 5 days right around the holidays. Well, we learned that the warming centers that I've talked about on you know, public radio and so forth, they're for people like me and you who get sidelined or stranded on the side of the road. They're for people who need to be 45 minutes waiting for the tow service, you know, getting my tire fixed, but eventually I'm going to go home to my warm, cozy house. Yeah, they're all over the county. There's like 14 of them. They're not meant for people that have nowhere to go. And there's about 100 of them in this community. About 100 people who basically are banned from the shelters, don't have money for a hotel room, apparently don't have friends for a couch to surf on. There's about 100 of them. And up until this coming winter, they have been cared for by the Salvation Army. They opened their doors. They didn't intake them. They just said, here's a cafeteria, here's a bedroll, it's insulated, have a good night. However, the city finally realized, after many years of this happening, that was against building code. And it is. There's not enough access or egress. There's not enough sprinklers. There's not enough plumbing. It's not safe. This is an issue that's not yet been resolved, but the Housing Coalition helped unveil it. Because we started talking about warming centers. They're just warming centers. But then there's like 100 people at Salvation Army's doorstep. I'm like, why aren't they going to the warming centers? Because they can't stay there for more than 2 hours. So they have to go from Meyer to the library to a church. I mean, you know, let's hope Connect Transit is running, right? It's not meant for people looking for 24 hours to stay. And so a subcommittee convened. Salvation Army is kind of in the crosshairs of this. They got an okay to continue doing it for this past winter. This coming winter, they're shut down. We don't have a solution for this winter. Faith-based organizations, in particular, Eastview, is getting involved. They have plans, but it won't be ready by this winter. They've got plans to redo what's the old Y and use that space for just this purpose. And they will collaborate with Salvation Army and probably Home Sweet Home to get because not only do you need walls and insulation, but you need people that know what they're doing, right? So they'll provide the space, work with the shelters for people. So I think that's going to be a great collaboration. It comes down to public safety versus public safety. Public safety of, non-compliance, public safety of leaving 100 people out in cold weather.
Kathleen, what's the holdup on not being able to use the old Y? Is it just,
Well, right now as it exists, it's also non-compliant.
okay,
Yeah. So they need about a year to fix it up, and then it'll be good to go. If I had one wish on this, it would be for another exception for one more year.
yeah, because it seems like this is a problem that needs temporary solutions and being a little flexible with our building codes.
Yeah. We're on borrowed time. We've been non-compliant for, a decade.
Yeah.
And, God forbid if something awful were to happen and, 100 people perish because there was not proper egress.
Right.
And that's not good either.
No,
They could perish out in the street.
yeah, but they're going,
They could
yeah,
perish out in the street.
that's the problem.
Well, if you have a real strong opinion about this, you could call your Bloomington alderman. All right, let's go on to the next one. So this is just some of the work that the coalition is doing. This is probably the meat and potatoes. We are really trying to find some of this other stuff we just sort of stumbled into, but we're really trying to find the gaps in helping people fill the gaps in helping people find permanent housing. We can put a check mark by this one. Yay! Coordinated approach getting a stability navigator. Mid-Central Community Action was able to hire one based on some funding that was provided by the municipalities for a 2-year demonstration project. They used ARPA funds. About $120,000 got this position up and running. It's going to need data to know who's doing, who needs what. And it's also going to need more funding for, like a pot of money for assistance. The schools are definitely at a loss for funding for assistance, and they are oftentimes the front door that the families come to when they say, we can't come back to school next Monday because we're moving, or we have nowhere to, not moving, we're being evicted. We have nowhere to live. And so the schools are oftentimes the first place that gets presented with this problem. They used to have a pot of funds. They really don't anymore. The agencies used to have bigger pots of funds. They really don't anymore because COVID funds have evaporated. A lot of the federal funding requires that you be completely homeless, so out on the curb. Most of the situations are eviction is pending. And wouldn't you really want to not tell somebody, oh yeah, you have to be out on the curb first before you can get funding? Wouldn't it be better if the funding came before you got evicted? I don't know, but that's where we are trying to, and United Way haven't made a final decision on this, but we are looking at where best to invest some of our private funds that have no restrictions, whether it be for pots of money like this, or maybe with some of the data collection and the technology piece, which is the next slide. This could be an investment too.
Going back to the housing navigator, is that position filled?
Yes, it is. Yes.
How
Started earlier this month.
I was gonna say, how deep into their participation in the role? Are they now operating in the role, or are they still in prep mode?
Yes. No. Well, they are probably coming up. Drinking from a fire hose, coming up to speed very quickly. Trying to figure out who their contacts are in all the social service agencies. The other big piece that they need to do is make connections with landlords. We've got a very cobbled together system of landlord identities. Almost every social service agency has their own little cache of landlords who they work with. We'd again, think about a database that could have, an interaction, almost a common repository for information about a Zillow, right? Hey, this apartment is available. And not only is it available, but it's also accessible to people with, certain circumstances. There's a lot of criteria that have to be met, and it would be much better handled in one central database. So the BN Innovation Alliance, aka Smart City, is a kind of
upstart group, they were a big plus in all of this because they helped us realize that there are systems out there like that we could go and get for not a lot of money. Yay. The downside, we are bound to this HMIS system for our continuum of care. We are McLean County is part of an 11 or a 13 county continuum of care that basically dictates the funds that we get from federal HUD dollars. And we have to have the same system that they have. And so we can't go out and buy our own cool system that would service us better. We have to use this large system that largely, if you talk to any social service agency, they would say stinks. So the contract holder for this and the coordinator of continuum of care is PATH. PATH right now, if you haven't heard, is in its own existential crisis. So this is a real big setback for us on trying to get a step ahead on technology. Where we're at right now, it's kind of TBD. We had a meeting just last week trying to build consensus for a local workaround. And that may draw on some of the practical ideas that were brought about in the 100-day challenge that just concluded this week. So number 3 and 4 almost kind of go together because in order for that housing navigator to be truly effective and efficient with her work, she needs this. So last but not least, every time I think, God, we're not really getting anywhere on this, I feel like, well, at least we're having a community conversation. And at least people like Ray invite me to come speak about it and maybe inform you all that there are these needs and that there is this coalition that is really trying to come together and crack this riddle. Everything from government agencies to school districts are on our calls, to faith-based organizations, to grassroots efforts, seem to be popping up all the time. So I do believe, I've got faith in this community that we will figure this out. It's just very, very complicated. It's one of the more complex issues that, kind of rivals the top 10, of complex issues. All right, so let's see where this goes from here. I think I'm finished. Just kind of back to the programs. I kind of took you down our pathways to prosperity, spent some time here talking about our community partnerships, but I end on this educational note of this is what's going on with United Way. So with that, I spoke very quickly, but there's a question in the back.
Any idea how the student loans, people with student loans, they're going to start having to come due or get back into gear? They've been in abeyance for 3 years now? And I'm talking about, secondary education. With those starting to come back into gear, how is that going to affect evictions? Well, especially with such a young community that's in Bloomington.
It's going to be one more stressor on them, as though the cost of rent going up isn't already a huge stressor, and inflation. Anecdotally, what I'm hearing, and this is where sort of my day job and my my council work kind of collide. Anecdotally, what I'm hearing is that some of the smaller landlords are selling out to property owners from out of the community. They come in, they give it a fresh coat of paint, a few new appliances, and took a $650 rent up to $1,000 or $1,100, and that's happening all the time. And anecdotally, I hear wait staff talk about, oh yeah, I'm not gonna be able to work. I need more hours because my rent went up from $800 to $1,200. And yeah, they've got student loans. So it's just one more stressor on them. So the more, I guess, the more that we can have coalition efforts like this and, try to pool our resources. I'm a big believer in public-private partnerships. There's money in the government, not in the local government, but just kidding. But I mean, seriously, there are, those programs are put in place with a lot of good intention. And I think they can be better, more effectively used when the local comes along and gives it a, kind of like the Thrive Month, gives it a little bit of a juice, to get it going. So I've got some materials here. I don't know if there's enough to go around, but this lighter copy is our kind of just a 2-page, well, 4-page, I guess, front and back of our summer update, what's going on. So that's something kind of fun to read. And I'll send that down this way. This is a little more, this is like a high dollar item. This was our few copies of our 2022 annual report. So I'll send that down. But thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Is there ever any discussion of rent controls?
There is, but I don't know that there have been any traction on that.
It's a tough one, I know.
Yeah. So that's big government getting involved and telling the landlords what to do.
Philosophically, it's just like a lot, some quarters anyway.
Yeah. But I think it's an idea that has been implemented in places, even if it's for a period of time. So,
How long are we bound by the agreement on the path? I mean, is that a something that terms out as something that's reviewed, and then who reviews
as far as them being part of the continuum, or us being part of
Right, well, I know you were saying it's keeping us from kind of getting our own whiz-bang system. that would help
Right.
Streamline this, because every little bit helps, obviously.
Exactly. It's it's like you stand in standing on the center line of a 2-way street. Like, what doesn't hit you this way hits you the other way. So yeah, let's get our own continuum of care, because Champaign County is in their own continuum of care. And what do we really have in common with Kankakee and Danville anyway? Those are in our continuum of care. Okay, we're going out on our own. Oh, wait. We get money based on the size and population of our continuum of care. So cut off your nose to spite your face. So I don't know how that one is gonna end up, to be honest.
I had a feeling it might have a lot of fingers. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna put a word out there for PATH. They are struggling. And I think that our community needs to know that and come around and support them and realize that, maybe what's just etched in all of our brains of like, oh, PATH will take care of that. For the time being, they're not able to, because they're really having to rebuild themselves. And I empathize with them, because United Way was not too far ago in that same situation.
I know you don't speak for them, but when you say the community comes together and support them, how could that look like?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's sitting in meetings like we had last week and having some empathy and sympathy, more than I was actually wanting to give them. But other social service agency directors were, I thought, being very graceful. So, I get concerned because as they're trying to figure out even who's on the continuum of care, I think, but we've got a crumbling system. So there's a sense of urgency. So if I had to paint a picture, it would be the directors of PATH and the key agencies coming together and figuring out, what can we take off your plate? What do you really want to do? I don't know if those kind of conversations are happening within their board of directors. I mean, those are the kind of conversations happening at United Way 6 or 7 years ago. So it's probably gonna take a lot of board governance and community support if they want it.
Do you still have at United Way the Council of Executive Directors?
We do not.
Yeah.
We do not. Yeah, we put that aside, but we also put aside, I think temporarily, the grant cycle. Because we don't do a grant cycle anymore. Because it was kind of always a disappointment that, you have far less money than you had before, and everybody was getting like $100 instead of 1,000 or 10,000, and so nobody was ever happy with us. And so, better that we direct some significant amounts of money, like $250,000 to the Bridge Academy, than $250 to $2,500. So I'd like for us to get back to a grant cycle someday, but we're working on our juicing up our revenue and our giving. So finding those 9,000 donors. So, we beefed up our donor database. We're doing a lot more with materials like this. We're getting savvy on some emails. It takes time. It takes time.
The companies, the large corporations that drop their employee connection
Giving, yeah.
plans,
Mhm.
employee giving payroll deduction, whatever, are they still donors on their own?
Well, what happens is two things. Payroll deduct is an amazing thing. And, there's a lot of people from State Farm that still have some sizable money coming out of their paychecks, and whether they realize it or not. And so we're grateful for payroll deduct. It depends on whether the company is giving a corporate gift, is what we would call that. Some cases they are, some cases they're not. So that means we have to kind of, find that donor in a different way. We're grateful for the individual donors that are providing from their employee payroll, but maybe it's connecting, getting out, with materials and emails and things like that, getting out and talking to groups like this and, CEOs, and just reminding them of what's going on with United Way.
Yeah. How available is a presentation like the one you just gave?
Just call me.
You're one person.
I know, David and I kind of tag team, so we're two people. Yeah, of course, yeah. So.
Kathleen, I think timing is always so important, whether it's a church or a school or United Way or whatever it is. There's a lot of ask in the community throughout the year.
Mhm.
And, it's hard to coordinate those, and maybe people don't want to coordinate them, but when you get two or three at the same time, you've got to make choices.
Yeah.
And, United Way used to be historically, a September,
It was a fall campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and a lot of people wait till October, November, so
Well,
that gets into the holiday season, so that's tough. So
We got
timing
plans.
is a big challenge for everybody.
yeah, I mean, everybody hits the year-end stuff, right? And so we're gonna be right there, more so than ever before, we're gonna be right there with them. And I think it's just taken us, sometimes you wish you could turn around on a dime and be able to, from 2016 to 2017 have, made it, but it's taken us some time to really find our feet again. And I suppose that may be the same with PATH. What are we all about? Should we still exist? I mean, those were some pretty painful moments. It was right before I joined United Way, but those are some painful moments and some pretty courageous decisions made by our board at the time. So, and I give David a lot of credit too, because I don't think there's anybody else that could have handled the kind of creative thinking that was needed. You kind of have to have the right guy or gal in that position. And he is a very creative, almost like kind of maverick thinker. If I had to put a title on him, I'd call him your chief innovation officer, because he is he just thinks things very differently. And I've come along and I'm maybe a little more traditional in my thinking. And so he's the big picture guy and I come along and do all the detail. So we make a really good match. I call him, he's kind of a big tall guy, likes basketball. And I say, I'll be your Scottie Pippen and you be Michael Jordan. So I can come in and give a talk and then kind of make him the setup, or I'm the setup person for him. So, but I think he and the board together were very instrumental in being the right people at the right time. So.
A whole lot of things have kind of affected giving negatively over the past 5 or 6 years, really. I mean, the Tax Act changes affected giving significantly as well.
Right. Inflation hasn't helped. Yeah, I know. Yeah, nationwide giving is down. I know, a lot of headwinds. So I have a few cards. So I'll leave them here. You can take a picture or divvy them up among yourselves. But I really appreciate your time. So,
Thank you.
All right, we're down to that which may arise. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about, anybody? That being the case, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Any against adjourning?
That's why we made you.